Alright, YouTube, so we are back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and also we're going to discuss the Game Awards for a couple of reasons. The most obvious one being that Remake is there in quite the capacity. It has 6 different nominations. And I kind of wanted to go over the nominations, mostly the Game of the Year award, and kind of discuss what I think is going to happen. And I guess we can look at the other nominations for Remake and what I think it might win and might not win. But also just kind of want to talk about the Game Awards in general because it's a big deal every year. It's kind of like an E3, right? Like, yes, it's an awards ceremony thing, but there's also like tons of reveals, like world premieres, trailers, and stuff like that. And speaking of that, Remake last year got one of its trailers at the Game Awards. Now, it was a relatively short trailer, it was like a minute and a half, and it was a cloud-centric trailer, and most of it we'd already seen before through other trailers and like E3 event and stuff like that. But there were some new stuff in this, so it was an okay trailer for that. Like, we got to see new things for the game at the time. So the obvious question that comes from this that I've been asked a few times over the past couple of weeks and month or so is, do I think we're going to see anything for Remake at the Game Awards? I want to. I just don't think it's going to happen, man. As much as we want something for Remake, and I think they want to, they could. They could give us a cinematic trailers. They could talk about it. They could do something, right? They could give us a brief something for Remake Part 2, but I don't think it's going to happen just because it's still super new it's only like 7 months old still, right? Like, it seems like 2020's gone by super fucking slow because of COVID and shit. It seems like it was so long ago the Remake came out, but it's only been like half a year or so. I guess by the time the Game Awards happens, it'll be exactly to the day 8 months, like December 10th, April 10th. I don't expect anything for Remake Part 2 until next year, till 2021, which isn't that far away. We're almost out of 2020, thankfully. This almost put this goddamn year behind us, but I don't expect to see anything for Part 2 until next year. But damn, I would love to be wrong on that. I have seen some people speculate that when it gets to that 1 year anniversary, once it gets to like April 10th of 2021, that they might start talking about DLC or Part 2. Like, you know, they're going to announce the game on other platforms, obviously. You know, Xbox One, PC, and probably the next gen, or I guess technically now those are current gen consoles. And they might then announce something for Part 2 or DLC for Part 1, potentially, which I think is a decent idea. It remains to be seen. So on to some nomination stuff, and before we even get into the actual nominations for Remake, I wanted to talk about the voice acting category, or Best Performance as it's called. And Remake wasn't a part of this, which was kind of shocking to me, for multiple reasons. One, the Remake voice acting is fantastic, especially John Eric Bentley and Brianna White, as Barrett and Aerith respectively, of course. I think they both knocked it out of the park. I think Britt Baron did a fantastic job as Tifa. I think Cody Christian did a good job as Cloud. But I think you could almost pick anybody out of the voice acting cast, like any of them, and it'd be a good choice. But the main thing that bothered me about this is that within this category, The Last of Us Part 2 has 2 nominations, which I think is kind of ridiculous. It's not the first time it's ever happened. I've seen it with other award shows. And like with movies where like 2 actors from the same movie are within the same category, it's not unheard of. But also that Miles Morales is in the running for the best performance overall, and it's like, that game, these nominations were out before the game even launched. These nominations were announced on the 18th. Miles Morales came out on the 19th, so how the fuck does that even work? I don't know, man, it's kind of bothered me. I feel like Remake got the shaft on that category for sure. Now on to the nominations Remake does have. For starters, Best Game Direction. This one I don't see Remake winning because their description says, awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. You can maybe argue the game direction thing with like the crazy new stuff they did with the story, but that's more of like the narrative award, I would think. And in terms of game design, like, Remake didn't do anything new with the hack and slash, like, action RPG genre. It's pretty boilerplate, pretty standard, so I don't see them winning that. On to the next nomination, Best Narrative, and their description for this one reads, for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game. And I do think Remake is deserving of this nomination. I just don't know that it's going to win that category because the story of Remake was one of the complaints, right? The new combat, that's something that a lot of people can't stand. It's not a turn-based game. But the story, the changes to the original game's story, that's one of the biggest complaints with the game, despite, you know, I have my gripes with it as well, but at the same time, we don't even know what the actual overall story is going to be. But that's one of the things that people don't like, is the new stuff. So I just don't know that it's going to win that category. And even though I do have my gripes with some of the stuff that they've added to the Remake story, what seems like it's going to be happening, the one thing I do like about the Remake project is the speculation, the talking, the discussing. If this was a one-to-one remake, as we talked about before, I would buy that, I'd play that. If it was a one-to-one remake, we wouldn't be having these conversations. There wouldn't be anything to speculate about because we know exactly what's going to happen in Part 2. And as part of that, as much as I'd play that, it would probably be kind of boring. On to the next nomination, Best Art Direction. Without even looking into the description of the award, is there a doubt in anybody's mind that Ghost of Tsushima is not going to win this? Like, that's one of the biggest praises of that game, is the artistic direction that game took. I feel like this award is an absolute steal for them. The animation and the visuals in Remake are fantastic, but I just don't see it winning over just Ghost of Tsushima, not even looking at the other nominees. Next nomination, Best Score in Music, and I think we can all agree that this is one that Remake has a very good chance of winning. It's something the Final Fantasy series as a whole is really known for, is the music. And of course, Remake has Uematsu attached to it, which at one point during development, at some point, I don't remember exactly when, it's been a few years or something, he wasn't going to be a part of the Remake project because of his health, obviously, but once his health kind of took a turn for the better, he joined Remake and started composing music for it, which obviously we all wanted. If you want somebody making your Final Fantasy music, that's the guy. And I think Remake has a very good chance of this because there's a ton of newer music with Remake that is just brand new to the game, but also there's remixes of iconic music from the original Final Fantasy VII. I think that's why there's a good chance it could win this category. The second to last category, we have Best Role Playing, and let's be completely honest here, Remake's probably not winning that one. The description says, for the best game designed with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences. Remake had very little customization in terms of an RPG, right? You could choose to use a certain kind of weapon for a certain fight if you had to. If you're playing the game on normal, it's not really that hard. It doesn't even really matter which weapon you're using. Maybe for hard mode, obviously, it matters. And your materia setup, that's where your choice really comes into play. But as an RPG, I just don't see it winning over something like Persona 5, which is obviously one of the other nominees. Or Genshin Impact, or Yakuza Like a Dragon, or Wasteland 3, which I don't know much about, but I imagine it offers a better role-playing experience. Now on to the big one, the Game of the Year award. In terms of the nominees, Doom Eternal, GTFO. There's zero chance ever that a Doom game, or any FPS game like that, is going to win a big Game of the Year award. There might be some obscure magazine out there or website that gives Doom Eternal the Game of the Year award, but in terms of the big ones like this, it's not going to ever happen. That's not to say that Doom Eternal is a bad game by any means, but I think you get my point here. Hades, I don't know shit about. Again, I've never heard of this game. Where did this game come from? It's probably not winning. Animal Crossing New Horizons. When it comes to the Animal Crossing series, I don't understand the appeal of it. I don't get why it's so popular. It is absolutely not a franchise for me. That being said, I would not be surprised if this snuck a win, simply because this game took over the world earlier this year. This game was out around the beginning of the lockdowns. This is what most of the world was playing while they were stuck at home. So just based on the sheer popularity of this game, it would not surprise me if it won. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I would not be surprised. Now on to the big three, the ones that I think are the most likely to win. Ghost of Tsushima, Remake, The Last of Us Part 2. If I am being completely unbiased here, if I am speaking objectively, do I think Remake was the best gaming experience of the year? Probably not. I love the game. I would not talk about it every single day of my life if I didn't, but I just don't see it winning the overall Game of the Year award. That's probably going to go to The Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima, and if I had to pick between the two, I'd probably pick Ghost. The thing is, Remake and The Last of Us Part 2 have had their controversies, right, from the storytelling perspective. The fan base of those games having problems with what takes place in the game. Ghost of Tsushima, I haven't heard a goddamn negative thing about that ever. The game has been overwhelmingly positively received. And people are still talking about that to this day. It came out not too far after The Last of Us Part 2, and nobody talks about The Last of Us Part 2 anymore. I haven't heard about that game in forever. And despite my problems with The Last of Us Part 2, I do think it is deserving of its nominations and the Game of the Year nomination. I don't know that it's going to win it. It wouldn't be surprised. Something like Animal Crossing wouldn't be surprised. But I feel like Ghost of Tsushima, man, it might sweep a lot of these. Remains to be seen. I have Ghost of Tsushima winning at least a couple of awards, man. I don't know exactly how many. I haven't really thoroughly thought it out, but I see that game winning at least 3, 4, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, that's pretty much the video. There's a ton of other categories. I think there's 30 different categories when it comes to nominations or whatever, and most of them are just not even worth favorite esports or some top esports, top esports caster. It's get out of here with that bullshit. I don't care. Best esports coach. What the fuck am I looking at, man? Anyways, that is officially the video. Let me know your thoughts on pretty much everything we talked about in the video, but the main one, of course, is who do you have to win Game of the Year? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. What's up, more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on all my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @David. My Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine or leave it like Cobain.